Today, I'm listing the 8 best defenders in modern NBA history. Before we get into this, what makes a great defender? Is it steals? Is it blocks? Is it getting an offensive charge? Keep this in mind as we count down the 8 best defenders in modern NBA history. Stick around, because my number 1 is not what you think it is. At number 8, I'll start with someone that NBA casuals might not know or might not remember. His name is Avery Bradley. Now, I know what you're thinking. Avery Bradley? Really? Yeah, the guy was a monster. He was a beast. His time with the Boston Celtics, but even when he was traded to Detroit Pistons, he was one of the most tenacious defenders the league has ever seen. Bradley was not one of those guys that waited for springtime to pick up his defensive intensity. He wasn't just about the playoffs. This guy would pick you up full court press in a regular season game on an irrelevant Wednesday night. He would make your life hell. He would make point guards regret choosing to bring the ball down the court. All you have to do is just go to Jeff Teague's podcast and listen to him talk about Avery Bradley and how he made him gave up the ball to a teammate because he couldn't bear his defensive intensity.
Guard me hard, so when he was picking me up full court, was guard me so hard one time they called a timeout in Boston playoffs. And I couldn't even hear the timeout. The guy was still trying to get by the nigga. He controller, still bro. There. Yeah. That nigga Larry Drew on the court said timeout. Yeah.
Bradley is a 6-time all-defensive player, and he's one of those guys that took pride in his craft. He just wanted to see people be miserable when he was guarding them. Defense wasn't a chore for him. He took pleasure in this. He enjoyed it. He strapped down, and he wanted to be a standout player because of his defense, and that's exactly what he achieved in his career.
Go back. Lost it again. Going to the floor is Bradley, kept it alive for Turner, and Turner will get...
At number 7, he's a player who is still in the league. He's a player who just last summer was an NBA champion. His name, Jrue Holiday. Teammates and foes alike just talk about Holiday's defensive prowess in every chance they get. Holiday can literally sit on a chair and create a brick wall that you cannot break through. His time with the Sixers and New Orleans Pelicans just kept him under the radar. He was an underrated player that not many people knew about. When he got paired with Giannis in Milwaukee though, everyone got to see why Jrue is on this list. He won a championship with the Greek Freak, and his defensive plays make the highlight reel of that year's championship.
Drive, gets inside, leans in, knocked away and stolen by Holiday. Phoenix has to foul, and a pinnacle ball throws it down. And a foul. Giannis on the alley-oop.
Steals, blocks, just a defensive savant, someone who understands spacing, who understands how to stay in front of his player. Jrue Holiday is someone who has an American football body. He's sturdy, he's big, he's strong. You cannot move him from his position. When Milwaukee sent him to Boston to bring in Damian Lillard, Jrue had something to prove, and last year he was an integral part in winning the championship for Boston. He was the guy you could rely on, that he could bring the defense together and just make those timely stops when you need them the most. This elite skill of Jrue Holiday, his ability to guard anyone from 1 through 4, to change in every pick, to sit down and just make life so difficult for offensive players, earned him a position on a roster that many other NBA players would love to be on. At number 6 is a guy who made defense cool, who made defense popular. His name, Gary the Glove Payton. Payton's nickname is not just another name. He was called the Glove because he would stick on defenders the same way a glove sticks on your hand. His defense was suffocating. He would get in people's faces. They would feel him. He would trash talk. He would borderline foul people to make his presence felt. Payton had 9 consecutive first-team all-defense appearances and has won the Defensive Player of the Year awards. Awards can mean something or in some occasions nothing, but in Payton's case, they just speak to the guy's dedication and devotion to defense. Payton is a reference point in NBA history when you talk about the art of defending. He was a guy who put his body through hell in an era where fouling was a bit more allowed in the game. He didn't care about sacrificing his body, about injuries. He would get into the fire and he would do anything possible to stop the best player of the opposing team. At number 5, we have none other than Dennis Rodman. The Worm was the defensive anchor for those famous Chicago Bulls teams. Rodman was a menace. He was a defensive stopper. He was a rebounding machine. The energy this guy produced on the defensive end of the floor is something to behold. 7 first-team All-Defense selections and 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards. Rodman, when you think of those Chicago Bulls, when you think of the three-peat, when you think of Michael Jordan, this guy was a foundational piece for the culture, the toughness, the legend, the myth of the Chicago Bulls. He literally gave zero about scoring a basket. This guy was all about getting every rebound, every deflected ball. He just wanted to disrupt the offense. He wanted to clear the boards. He was a guy who just was thirsty to play defense. It was his whole being, his whole existence was based on playing defense and being the best defender of the floor. Halfway through the list, at number 4, we have Big Ben Wallace. Wallace is tied for the most Defensive Player of the Year awards with 4. Standing at just 6'9", this guy was such a presence for the Detroit Pistons. He was a guy that was feared among the league. He was a guy that was that big, strong, sturdy, fearsome defender every team needs under the basket. The afro hair, the characteristic big guns, just the facial expression. Big Ben Wallace is a Detroit Piston legend, and he's considered one of the greatest defenders in NBA history. Without him, there is no championship for those 04 Pistons. Coming in at number 3 is another Chicago Bull, and his name is Scottie Pippen. Scottie is such an underrated player. Just because he was overshadowed by MJ, some people just forget, some people don't remember that Scottie was such a big reason as to why those Bulls teams were as successful as they were. His defensive versatility, his ability to guard multiple positions, his IQ, he was there to clean up. He was the last line of defense. Pippen was a specimen. Pippen was what you think of when you're designing an NBA defender in a lab. He was tall, he was strong, he knew how to sit down in a defensive position, he knew how to intercept passing lanes, he knew how to send defenders down the baseline. He was an elite rebounder. You don't get them like that anymore. Wings like Scottie Pippen are not easy to come by. There is a reason why three-peats are not a common thing, because you need foundational pieces that want to sacrifice themselves and their role as defensive stoppers. And those Chicago Bulls didn't have one. They had 2. They had Rodman and they had Pippen leading the front line. We're almost there. At number 2, Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon. This guy, man, his combination of size, of athleticism, of quickness, of IQ is unmatched. We haven't had a player playing center having all these attributes. Olajuwon ranks in the top 10 of all time in steals, and he is the NBA all-time leader in blocked shots. Yeah, his 89-90 season might just be the greatest defensive season of all time. Wanna know why? Listen to these averages. Again, averages. 14 rebounds, 4.6 blocks, almost 5 blocks per game, and last but not least, 2.1 steals as a center. Jesus freaking Christ. 14 rebounds, 4.6 blocks, and 2.1 steals. If that doesn't put him in the pantheon of greatest defensive players of all time, I don't know what does. And now you might be thinking, if Hakeem is not at the top of this list, who is? Well, it's time for the big reveal. The number one, the best defender in modern NBA history is Tony Allen. Yeah, I said it, you heard me. Tony mother freaking Allen, the Grindfather. Before you come at me, just hear me out. What makes Allen the best, what puts him at the top of my list, is his mindset, the level of preparation he had to go into these games. Allen would ask the equipment guy to get him tapes on the guy he was about to defend. He would study his isolation moves, he would study what this guy does on the weak side. Allen wasn't just getting into the game hoping for a good night. He was a defensive savant. He would sit at night and think about these things, write them down, break them down. Defense wasn't just another thing he had to do on the court. It was the thing. He would study it. He would take it in. He would go about his day just obsessing about defense. Getting down to the details and the nitty-gritty, if you study Tony Allen, most defenders that take themselves seriously, they crouch down into a defensive position. What they teach you when you're getting into basketball is like sitting on a chair. No. Tony Allen went against conventional wisdom. This guy would have an unusual upright stance. Why? This would give him the opportunity to turn very quickly and to run and reposition himself when a guard would just try to get past him. This unique style of defending made him a nightmare for every guard in the league. If you think I'm talking trash, if you think that my selection is just not good, well, don't listen to me. Maybe listen to someone named Kobe Bean Bryant. When Bryant was asked who was the toughest defender he ever faced in his career, what name did he come up with?
Well, the player I always had the most trouble with individually was always Tony Allen.
When you have the seal of approval from one of the best offensive players the game has ever seen, what do I know about basketball? In 2014-15, Allen was the only player in NBA history to record at least 3 games with 6 or more steals. Fathom that. He was selected 6 times in the all-defensive team, 3 first and 3 second. And it's not just about the individual accolades and accomplishment by Allen. This guy defined an entire era of basketball in Memphis. That team with Zach Randolph and the Gasol brother, the young one, that era is actually called grit and grind because of that team's defensive prowess. Who was the head of the snake? Tony motherfucking Allen. Who can forget that game with the Golden State Warriors when Allen just stole the ball from Klay Thompson and was shouting, "First team all defense! First team all defense!"
First team all defense! First team all defense!
This guy his DNA was defense. Like if you go into a dictionary and read what defense is all about, there should be a picture of Tony Allen. He felt it. He was so passionate about being the best defender in the league. He didn't care about points. He didn't care about shots, about percentages. This guy was about suffocating. This guy was about destroying the other team's best offensive player. There you have it. My list of the 8 best defensive players in modern NBA history. Do you agree with the list? I would really like to see who would you swap on the list. Who didn't make it on mine? Who do you think should be on this list? Just drop it in the comments and let's have a discussion. Bring it on.